Hello, everyone. My name is Brennan Takayama, and it's an honor to be able to share with you some of my research at this wonderful conference. Special mahalo to Dr. Patty Iwasaki, a dear friend of mine who invited me to share research at this conference. Um, t- Today, I'll be sharing with you about some of my research that has built upon itself over the course of the last 18 years or so. I graduated from Stanford University in 2007 with a master's in social sciences in education and continued my research at Kamehameha Schools in the Research and Evaluation Division, working specifically on a Native Hawaiian culture-based education project called Hawaiian Cultural Influences in Education. I've been working with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, a faith-based nonprofit in higher education here in Hawaii, since 2007. And the research that I'm sharing with you now is a culmination of projects that I've worked on at each of these three different institutions. So my specific topic today is culture-based education and its effect on student ministry outcomes. First of all, who am I? Like I said, my name is Brennan Takayama. I was born and raised in Hilo, specifically an area called Waiakea-Uka, so just up the road from the university, maybe about 15 minutes. I grew up on a cattle farm that my grandparents bought in the 1950s. And of course, this is all land of the Kanaka Uivi, or Native Hawaiians. On my dad's side, I'm a descendant of Japanese immigrants who moved from Hiroshima, Japan to work on the sugarcane plantations of the Hamakua coast, or the coast north of Hilo on the east side of Hawaii Island in the late 1800s. And I'm also the descendant of Cantonese, Chinese immigrants from China to Hawaii through San Francisco Chinatown and back to Hawaii first in 1870. Both of my great grandfathers and my Chinese sons are paper sons. Um, I won't get into that specifically right now, but it is an interesting topic if you're interested in looking that up a little bit more. Like I mentioned, I have degrees from Stanford University. My bachelor's is in human biology, an interdisciplinary program in natural and social sciences with my specific concentration in adolescents of underserved communities. And I got my master's in social sciences in education at the Stanford School of Education as well. I want to offer a specific mahalo and thanks to folks who have made this research possible through the years. First of all, my supervisors at Kamehameha Schools many years ago, Sean Kanaiaupuni and Brandon Ledward, as well as the advisory committee of educators from various schools around Hawaii, including Native Hawaiian charter schools and Kola Kaiapuni or Hawaiian language immersion schools, as well as to the staff and volunteer and students with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in the islands. So you may be wondering, how is this topic related to the humanities? And so, I'm speaking with you today specifically about culture-based education in a context of students in higher education. And so the topics of religion and culture are typically viewed as fields in the humanity, and education is very interdisciplinary. It's a field that is studied, but is not necessarily an approach to how you study things. I personally have a background in sociology, and so I take a sociological approach to studying religion through quantitative analysis, and you'll see that in this research. So first of all, what is culture-based education? And so I quote from literature from Alcantara, Keahiolalo, and Pierce. Keahiolalo was a colleague of mine at Kamehameha Schools. It says culture-based education is grounded in the foundational values, norms, knowledge, beliefs, practices, experiences, and language of a culture, or even specifically an indigenous culture. It places significance on native language, place-based and experiential learning, cultural identity, holistic well-being, and personal connections, and belonging to family, community, and ancestors. Um, and within the larger literature base for culture-based education, there are 5 elements that comprise this approach. And they are language, family, community, context, content, and data and accountability. So for example, the language that curriculum is delivered in, the relationships that are used within an educational context, the context, not just within the four walls, but having project-based things, being out in the Aino or in the land. Content, that can be something as simple as like studying something that is relevant to a specific culture, and data and accountability, actually being able to look and see what are the effects of the curriculum that is used. So this definition specifically talks about indigenous cultures, but it is relevant to non-indigenous cultures as well. So I mentioned earlier that I worked on the Hawaiian cultural influences in education study while I was an analyst at Kamehameha schools. And a little bit of background about this study. It was the largest quantitative study looking at the connection between culture and education in history that we know of here in Hawaii. There were 600 teachers who participated in the study across a variety of different types of schools, including regular public schools, a variety of types of charter schools, as well as Hawaiian language immersion schools. And there were 3,000 students as well, including both Native Hawaiian and non-Hawaiian students. And the purpose was to examine connections between culture-based education use among teachers to various educational outcomes. So you can see in this model, at the top in white, there's culture-based education, different facets of culture-based education that teachers use. And the theory behind it is that CBE affects educational outcomes directly, but also affects educational outcomes indirectly through socio-emotional development, such as self-worth and relationships with family and community. So culture-based education, like I mentioned before, focuses on these 5 different aspects of language, content, context, ohana community or family and community, as well as assessment. And it's going to be upon these specific facets of CBE that I'm going to be sharing with you about some of the findings of the study, as well as application to my work with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and looking at outcomes for college students in a culture-based program in higher education. So first of all, is this even relevant to a faith-based context? And so in my specific instance, it is a Christian faith-based context. InterVarsity Christian Fellowship runs chapters on over 600 college campuses here in Hawaii, as well as across the United States. And so, it is something that is biblically based and looking to the model of Jesus. And so when I look at the model of ministry of Jesus, it does seem very culture-based to me. So for example, using language, Jesus uses the language of the people in the area, and he spoke multiple languages, 3 or 4 different languages, according to this history.com site. And, the context that he was doing things, he wasn't just teaching within the walls of a temple or a synagogue, but his teaching with his followers was very hands-on. When he was speaking to farmers, he used farming language. When he was speaking to lawyers, he used law language. So his content was also culturally relevant as well. Ohanan community, like the model of Jesus' ministry, is very place-based for the specific place that things were, and the relationships were essential in everything that he was doing. And while a lot of folks think of family as at least currently in a Western family unit is thought of as a nuclear family of 2 parents and children, but Jesus brought in the definition of family, as you can see in this quote from Matthew 12. And he was always with people in the community, not just with other religious leaders. And lastly, around assessment, Jesus's ministry always intentionally had a specific type of outcome. And so even after Jesus' death and resurrection, and he is encountering his disciples again, he is recasting vision for Simon, son of John, to have a picture of what he wants Simon's life to be about. And then also, like, Jesus models ministry, and then he sends his disciples to do the same in both Luke 10 as well as in Acts as well. So with that understanding of Jesus' model of ministry, I can see that, or I attempt to show that a culture-based education model is relevant for a faith-based context as well. Let's go back to the Hawaiian cultural influences in education study. And so I just want to show a little bit of the specific outcomes that we found comparing high culture-based education teachers to low culture-based education teachers. So in the study, teachers were separated into two groups, those that use the highest levels of culture-based education and those that use the lowest levels of culture-based education, looking at outcomes for their students. So as you can see in these two charts, in figure 1, emotional engagement and attitudes towards school relationships, percent of Hawaiian students who agree. And so you can see that there are significant differences between how students of teachers who use the highest levels of CBE trust people at higher levels, feel that their teachers go out of their way to help them, and feel that people at their school are like family. In addition, cognitive engagement and applied learning is higher among students of teachers who use the highest levels of culture-based education as well. One of the specific examples I'll talk about is being able to practice skills they learn in school at home. We all know that we don't want school learning to just be relevant at school, but to be relevant outside of school as well. There's also evidence that high culture-based education use is connected to positive self-concept. And so looking at ethnic identity, we can see that there are significantly higher sense of connection to the larger ethnic group for students of high culture-based education teachers. So some folks may think that high ethnic identity actually counters a sense of self-concept for other things, but what we found actually showed that self-efficacy, there was actually no significant difference between students of high CBE teachers and students of low CBE teachers, but there is significant difference in terms of positive ethnic identity for students of high CBE teachers. And lastly, we see that high culture-based education use is connected to community attachment and give back. So students of high CBE teachers are more connected to their communities. And so when we think of Aina or land, there are several different things that we can recognize, like being able to name native plants or to retell stories about their community or to identify names of wind and rain here in the islands. But also, thinking about community involvement, students are more engaged in their communities and more able to put what they're learning into action in a number of different ways. So for example, working to protect the environment, such as oceans, streams, forests, etc., in the community. Much, much higher rates of students of high CBE teachers that say that they have done that compared to students of low CBE teachers. And so all of these figures that I've shared with you so far are actually from the Culture and Education Brief series from Kamehameha Schools, which can be found on the Kamehameha Schools website. I also want to make reference to my master's thesis that was actually published in the Kamehameha Schools Hulili Journal for Native Hawaiian Wellbeing. And so the title of this paper was Academic Achievement Across School Types in Hawaii, Outcomes for Hawaiian and Non-Hawaiian Students in Conventional Public Schools, Western Focused Charters, and Hawaiian Language and Culture-Based Schools. And the big finding for this study that I did was that students in Hawaiian language and culture-based schools actually have more positive educational outcomes, both for Native Hawaiian students and non-Hawaiian students as well. So the findings that I previously shared from the Hawaiian Cultural Influences in Education study, those focus specifically on Native Hawaiian students, but this paper, my master's thesis, was looking at both Hawaiian and non-Hawaiian students. And actually, there's a larger paper from the Hawaiian Culture Influences in Education study that also shows that there are wonderful positive outcomes of culture-based education for both Native Hawaiian and non-Hawaiian students as well. And so feel free to look that paper up from Kana'iaupuni and Ledward. So the specific question that I've been focusing on in the context of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship are what are outcomes for student participants, college students, in a faith-based, culture-based program? Are there positive outcomes? And so we have been doing a spring break program in Hilo since 2009. It is a 5-day immersion into the Hawaii Island community to listen, learn, and serve with the Aloha of Jesus. We're doing things like working in a lo'ikalo or a taro farm, um, hearing from kupuna elders, as well as very specifically Christian things like studying biblical scripture, praying together. And it is a very culture-based program that is specifically trying to help students to grow in a number of different areas. So here's some pictures of that, working in a lo'ikalo in Waipio Valley, learning from kupuna, as you can see in the bottom right picture, as well as just applying a cultural framework to different biblical passages that we're studying that week. So a specific curriculum that we implemented starting in 2018 was an orientation program called Journey Hawaii. It's a place-based, culture-based program across the 5 different areas of culture-based education, using a framework of engage, relate, respond. So we created this website that students were able to pull up on their phone. They went to a specific location in Hilo, engaged through reading something or watching a video, and then responding in a faith-based way through reflection, prayer, and sharing. And so I'd like to share with you about outcomes based on surveys, pre and post surveys, entry and exit surveys that we did from InterVarsity's Urban Programs Department. So we administered this survey to all of the student participants in 2019, both before the program started as well as after the program ended, so that we could be able to track change over the course of the program. So seeking justice is an outcome that we were hoping for from student participants in the program. So on a Likert scale of 0 to 5, students, stated their level of agreement with this statement. Seeking justice for the marginalized is an active part of my life. And so before the survey, average student responses were 3.7 out of 5, and that increased 0.6 points to 4.3 out of 5. So one freshman who was in the program, a local student, says, I feel like spring break retreat has set on just a sort of call to action, to help others, a call to fight for union restoration. And that's to me, that is, some qualitative evidence from a specific student talking about how she was growing in seeking justice for the marginalized. Another educational outcome that we're looking toward is financial stewardship. So many students, regardless of faith background, struggle with managing money. And so we asked this question. We asked for students agreement with this statement. I live out the Bible's warnings about money in several specific ways. And you can see that, there was also an increase in students who agree with this statement, an increase of 0.9 points out of 5 from 3.4 to 4.3. And there's a student from the University of Hawaii at Manoa who said the content of this program should eliminate our ignorance to the injustices. My apologies, some technical issues. Lastly, we asked students to respond to the statement, Specific teachings of scripture are directly shaping my career trajectory and their level of agreement with that. And we can see that pre-survey, students responded in agreement on a 4.0 out of 5, and it increased to a 4.4 out of 5, so a nearly half-point increase. And so an engineering student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa shared about how the spring break program helped to grow her heart for justice and the connection of faith and culture, helping to heal her cultural identity here in Hawaii, as well as calling her to greater advocacy and leadership in the non-native local community. And also gave her a vision for what it means to be a justice-seeking engineer. And actually, this student, or now alum, is a friend of mine, and she is really trying to be a justice-seeking engineer here in Hawaii. And so these are some of the ways that we see that college students actually experienced some positive outcomes based on this culture-based program, varsity spring break program, on some of the educational outcomes that we hope to see. So what are some implications of this research? One, I would say, is that religious education or faith-based programs do not need to be westernized in order to have impact. And so, participants in a varsity Christian fellowship come from a diversity of backgrounds: Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, local Asian, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Korean, etc., as well as students from the US continent who are white, or students of color, and international students as well. Being able to be in Hawaii on Native Hawaiian land and incorporating Native Hawaiian values into the program actually showed really positive outcomes from this program, things that we would like to see students to be able to come out with. I'd also say that maybe there are implications for other programs as well, other religious programs, other non-religious programs, but definitely we're seeing that there are positive outcomes. And I think it's largely because the elements of culture-based education, of language, context, content, family and community, and assessment, those are all just really positive things in making education more relevant, not just experiencing education through head and paper and pen and books, but actually putting learning into action. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this presentation, and I would welcome any type of feedback. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. My email address is on the first slide. Mahalo nui. Aloha.